November 8th, 1943, 11:47 in the morning. Ann Carl was doing her pre-flight inspection of P-51D tail number 43-1.789 when she noticed something wrong with the hydraulic line. A series of scratches. Thin parallel lines cut into the braided steel covering near the connection port. Ann crouched down to look closer. The scratches were fresh, bright metal showing through. She ran her finger along them. They felt deliberate, too uniform to be accidental damage. Sergeant Mike Hollis walked over. He was the crew chief assigned to this aircraft. 42 years old, thick arms, a face that looked like it had been carved from oak and left in the rain. "What is the problem, Miss Carl?" Ann pointed at the scratches. "These marks on the hydraulic line. Are they normal wear?" Hollis bent down, looked for maybe 3 seconds, stood back up. "Yeah, that is just where the line rubs against the mounting bracket during flight. Vibration. Nothing to worry about. The line is inspected every 50 flight hours. This aircraft only has 23 hours since last inspection. It is fine." Ann hesitated. The scratches did not look like vibration wear. They looked like someone had taken a file or saw blade and deliberately scored the line. But Hollis was the crew chief. He had maintained aircraft for 18 years. Ann had been a test pilot for 6 months. Who was she to question his judgment? She nodded. "All right. Thank you, Sergeant." Hollis walked away. Ann finished her pre-flight inspection. Everything else looked normal. She climbed into the cockpit. It was Emily's 6th birthday today. Ann's daughter. Emily lived in Dayton with Ann's mother because Ann could not raise a child while working 14-hour days at Wright Field. Ann had not seen Emily in 3 months, but today was special. Ann had arranged leave for tonight. She would drive to her mother's house, have dinner with Emily, meatloaf and mashed potatoes, Emily's favorite, then cake, chocolate with vanilla frosting. Ann had even bought a present, a stuffed rabbit. Emily had been asking for a rabbit for months. Ann had wrapped it herself, hidden it in her footlocker. She just had to survive this one test flight. 1 hour. Test the P-51D's new aileron configuration. Then she would go home, see her daughter, be a mother for 1 evening instead of a test pilot. Ann strapped into the harness, adjusted the rudder pedals, checked the instruments. Everything looked good. The P-51D was a beautiful aircraft, sleek, fast. The Rolls-Royce Merlin engine gave it a top speed over 400 miles per hour. But the D variant had problems. The new bubble canopy changed the aircraft's center of gravity. The ailerons needed modification to improve roll rate. That was what Ann was testing today. New aileron balance weights. She would put the aircraft through a series of rolls and turns at different speeds. Measure the control response. Write up a report. Simple test. She had done it 100 times. She started the engine. The Merlin caught on the second try. That beautiful sound. 12 cylinders firing. 490 horsepower. The whole aircraft vibrated. Ann loved that feeling. The connection between pilot and machine. She taxied to the runway. Wright Field Tower cleared her for takeoff. Ann pushed the throttle forward. The P-51 accelerated, 60 miles per hour, 80, 100. The tail came up. At 110 miles per hour, Ann pulled back on the stick and the aircraft lifted off the runway. Gear up, flaps up, climb power. She turned west toward the test area. The sky was gray. November in Ohio. Cold. Ann climbed to 12,000 feet, leveled off. The test protocol called for aileron response checks at 3 speeds, 200 miles per hour, 300 miles per hour, and 340 miles per hour. Ann started with 200. She rolled the aircraft left. Smooth. Good response. Rolled right. Also smooth. She made notes on her kneeboard. Increase speed to 300. Rolled again. The response was slightly slower. Normal. The ailerons had more air resistance at higher speed. She made more notes. Increase speed to 340 miles per hour. This was the critical test. At high speed, the original aileron design had caused control reversal. The aircraft would roll opposite to the pilot's input. The new balance weights were supposed to fix that problem. Anne prepared to roll left. She pushed the stick. The aircraft began to roll, and then everything went wrong. The stick went dead in her hands. No resistance, no response. Anne pushed harder. Nothing. She tried the rudder pedals. They locked solid. She could not move them. Something was catastrophically wrong with the flight controls. Anne's heart rate spiked. Training took over. She checked the hydraulic pressure gauge. 0. Both systems, primary and backup. That should be impossible. The two systems were independent. They could not both fail simultaneously unless something had severed both lines. Unless someone had cut both lines. Unless those scratches Hollis had dismissed were not vibration wear. Unless they were deliberate sabotage. Anne had maybe 60 seconds before the aircraft became unflyable. She was at 12,000 feet, doing 340 miles per hour with no hydraulic pressure. The P-51 started rolling left, slowly at first, then faster. The nose dropped. The altimeter unwound. 11,000 feet, 10,000 feet. The Ohio countryside spun below. Brown fields, gray roads, the great Miami River, like a silver thread cutting through the landscape. Anne tried the emergency hydraulic pump, manual backup. She pumped her hand 20 times. The gauge stayed at 0. Someone had sabotaged the backup too. 9,000 feet. The P-51 was in a spiral now, accelerating, 360 miles per hour, 380. Anne felt G-forces pushing her into the seat, blood draining from her brain. Her vision narrowed. She thought about Emily, about the stuffed rabbit in her footlocker, about meatloaf and mashed potatoes and chocolate cake, about never seeing her daughter again, about Emily growing up without a mother. Anne Carl was 28 years old. She had logged 1,847 flight hours. She was one of the best pilots in the Army Air Forces, and she was about to die because someone had cut her hydraulic lines. No, Anne gritted her teeth. She was not dying today, not before Emily's birthday dinner. She cut the engine, pulled the throttle to idle cutoff. The Merlin coughed and died. Sudden silence except for wind screaming past the canopy. The aircraft kept spinning but slower. Less speed meant less aerodynamic stress. 7,000 feet. Anne pushed the stick forward, not pulling back, pushing forward, using gravity to help break the spin. The horizon blurred. Sky, ground, sky, ground. Her stomach lurched. She tasted bile. 5,000 feet. The spin slowed. She could feel it. The P-51 was responding to basic aerodynamics. 3,000 feet. The aircraft stopped spinning, started falling. Nose down at 60 degrees, falling like a thrown knife. Anne reached up and grabbed the canopy release. Pulled hard. The canopy exploded off into the slipstream. Wind blasted into the cockpit at 200 miles per hour. It felt like being hit by a truck. Papers flew everywhere. Her flight cap ripped off. Cold November air tore at her face. The smell of engine oil and aviation fuel. The sound of wind like a freight train. 2,000 feet. Anne unbuckled her harness, prepared to jump. But at 200 miles per hour, the slipstream would smash her into the tail. She would be dead before the parachute opened. So she stayed, falling. 1,000 feet. She could see individual trees, a barn, a tractor, a man looking up at her falling aircraft. 800 feet. The P-51's nose came up slightly. Natural aerodynamic stability. The angle changed from 60 degrees to 45 degrees. Still falling, but falling slower. 600 feet. Anne made her choice. She was not jumping. She was riding this aircraft into the ground. She pulled herself back into the seat, buckled the harness, the webbing cut into her shoulders. She braced her feet against the rudder pedals, gripped the useless control stick. 400 feet, 200 feet. She pulled back on the stick with everything she had. It did not move the control surfaces, but it shifted her body weight. The nose came up another 5 degrees. 100 feet, 50 feet. Impact. The P-51 hit frozen earth at 140 miles per hour. The sound was not a sound. It was violence made audible, metal tearing, rivets shearing. The engine mount crumpled like paper. The propeller disintegrated. Blades flew off in different directions. One blade sliced through a fence post 100 yards away. The aircraft skidded across the field belly first. Dirt exploded. Anne's head snapped forward. Her face hit the instrument panel. She felt her nose break, tasted blood, hot and metallic. The harness dug into her chest. She heard her ribs crack, felt them break. 3 ribs on the left side. The pain was immediate and total. The aircraft kept sliding, 300 feet, 400 feet, tearing itself apart. The wings folded up. Fuel sprayed from ruptured tanks. The smell of high-octane aviation gasoline filled the air. Anne's vision went gray, then black, then gray again. The aircraft flipped. She was hanging upside down, still strapped in, looking at frozen dirt through the missing canopy. Everything hurt, her face, her chest, her arms, her legs, everything. Silence. Anne hung there for maybe 30 seconds. Then the reality hit her. She had survived. She was alive. Emily would get her birthday dinner. Anne started laughing, then crying, then laughing and crying at the same time. Uncontrollable, hysterical. Her whole body shook, tears mixed with blood running down her forehead into her hair. She could not stop, could not breathe. The broken ribs made every sob agony, but she could not stop sobbing. Then training reasserted itself. Anne forced herself to breathe slowly. In, out, in, out. The crying stopped. She unbuckled the harness, fell 2 feet onto her shoulders into cold mud, crawled out from under the wrecked aircraft, stood up. Her legs shook. She vomited into the dirt. Once, twice, 3 times, nothing but bile and blood. Her hands were trembling. She could not make them stop. She looked at the wreckage. The P-51 was destroyed, scattered across a frozen Ohio field in 100 pieces. $30 million of experimental aircraft turned into scrap metal. Anne walked around the wreck on unsteady legs, looking for the hydraulic lines. She found them near what used to be the cockpit. Both lines, primary and backup, cut, not broken, cut. Someone had used a knife or wire cutters to slice through the braided steel almost completely, leaving just enough intact that the lines would hold during pre-flight, but would fail under pressure during flight. Those scratches Hollis had dismissed. They were not vibration wear. They were saw marks. Someone had been sawing through the hydraulic lines. Anne had trusted Hollis, and Hollis had either been incompetent or complicit. Anne heard an engine. She looked up. An Army staff car was driving across the field toward her. Behind it came a transport truck. The car stopped 20 feet from the wreckage. The passenger door opened. Lieutenant Michael Chen got out. Chen was 26 years old, a fighter pilot. He had been flying P-47 Thunderbolts until yesterday when Anne had saved his life. Yesterday, Chen's radio had failed during a test flight. He could not contact the tower, could not get landing clearance, did not know if the runway was clear. Anne had been in the tower. She had grabbed a flare gun, run outside, fired green flares to signal the runway was clear. then stood on the runway waving her arms, directing Chen to land. He had landed safely. Walked up to Anne and said, "Thank you for saving my life." Anne had said, "You are welcome." That was yesterday. Now Chen was looking at her wrecked aircraft, looking at Anne covered in blood and mud. His face went white. "Miss Carl," Chen said, "are you all right?" Anne tried to speak. Her voice cracked. She cleared her throat. Tried again. "Someone cut my hydraulic lines. Both systems. This was sabotage. I need you to be my witness." Chen stared at her, then at the wreckage, then back at her. He nodded slowly. "I am your witness." The transport truck arrived. Colonel James Harris got out. Harris was 47 years old, silver hair, square jaw. He had flown bombers in World War I, had watched his son die in a P-40 crash in 1942. The woman pilot training that day had made a mistake, had given his son wrong instructions over the radio. The crash was not her fault. The investigation had cleared her. But Harris blamed her anyway, blamed all women pilots. He believed they were dangerous, believed they got men killed. When Anne had arrived at Wright Field 6 months ago, Harris had opposed her assignment, had tried to have her transferred, had failed because Anne was too good. Now he walked toward her. His face showed nothing, no relief, no concern, just cold evaluation. "Miss Carl," Harris said, "that was a $30 million aircraft." Anne felt rage cut through the pain in her chest. "Someone cut my hydraulic lines, Colonel, both primary and backup. This was deliberate sabotage. Lieutenant Chen is my witness." Harris looked at Chen. Chen nodded. "I saw the cut lines, sir. They were not damaged by impact. They were cut before the flight." Harris's jaw tightened. "Lieutenant, return to base. You are dismissed." Chen hesitated. "But sir, that is an order, Lieutenant." Chen looked at Anne, then back at Harris. He saluted. "Yes, sir." He walked back to his car, drove away. Anne and Harris stood alone, except for 6 enlisted mechanics standing by the truck. "Colonel," Anne said, "I want a formal investigation. This is the 3rd attempt on my life in 2 months. Someone on this base is trying to kill me." Harris looked at the wreckage, then back at Anne. His expression softened slightly. "Miss Carl," he said quietly, "my son died in a crash 2 years ago. A woman pilot was training that day. She made a mistake, cost him his life. I know you are good at what you do. But every time you fly, I see my son's face. I see that woman who killed him. I know that is not rational. I know that is not fair to you. But I cannot change how I feel." Anne stared at him. "Are you saying you arranged this sabotage?" Harris shook his head. "No, I would never do that. But I did not stop it either. Men on this base resent you. They believe women do not belong in fighters. Some of them have been making threats. I dismissed those threats as talk. I was wrong." Anne felt her legs shaking again. "Who? Who made threats?" Harris looked away. "Sergeant Hollis, Captain Raymond, Lieutenant Foster, maybe others. I do not have proof, just talk in the officers' club." Anne remembered Hollis dismissing the scratches on the hydraulic line. Hollis, who had fueled her aircraft before the engine failure in October. Hollis, who had been working on her landing gear before it collapsed. Hollis. "I want Hollis arrested," Anne said. Harris shook his head. "I cannot arrest a man for talk. You need proof." Anne pointed at the wreckage. "The cut hydraulic lines are proof." Harris looked at the wreck. Those lines were damaged in the crash. Impact stress. The investigation will show that. Anne felt her control breaking. "You are going to cover this up, just like the landing gear, just like the engine failure." Harris met her eyes. "Miss Carl," If I investigate this as sabotage, the WASP program is finished. The newspapers will report that women pilots are being murdered at Wright Field. Congress will shut down the program. 1,100 women pilots will lose their jobs. Is that what you want? Anne wanted to scream, wanted to hit him, wanted to arrest him for obstruction. But she was not military. She was civilian. She had no authority, no recourse, no protection. She was standing in a frozen field with broken ribs and a broken nose, arguing with a colonel who had already decided to bury the truth. "Report to the base hospital," Harris said. "Get your injuries treated. Take 3 days medical leave. When you come back, we will discuss your future assignment. Maybe a transfer to a transport unit would be appropriate. Safer." Anne realized she was not going to win. Not here. Not now. She nodded. "Yes, sir." Harris walked back to the truck. The mechanics loaded some pieces of wreckage. They drove away. Anne stood alone in the field. She started walking toward the road. Every step hurt. Her ribs screamed. Her face throbbed. After maybe 200 yards, she sat down on a fence post, put her head in her hands, started crying again. Quiet this time. Just tears running down her face, mixing with dried blood. She cried for maybe 5 minutes. Then she wiped her face, stood up, started walking again. Wright Field was 3 miles away. Anne walked the whole distance. It took her an hour. When she reached the base, she went straight to her quarters, the WASP barracks, a small building at the edge of the base. Her roommates were not there. Anne opened her footlocker, pulled out the wrapped present, the stuffed rabbit for Emily. She unwrapped it, held it against her chest. The broken ribs made it hurt, but she did not care. She held the rabbit and thought about her daughter and about how close she had come to never seeing her again. Then she put the rabbit down, pulled out her private notebook, the one where she tracked incidents. She wrote down everything. November 8th, 1943. P-51D, tail number 43, Wumpfeen 789. Hydraulic failure at 12,000 feet. Both systems, cut lines. Hollis dismissed scratches during pre-flight. Harris covered up investigation. Witness Lieutenant Chen. Then she locked the notebook in her footlocker, changed into clean clothes, walked to the base operations building. She found Captain Robert Klein's office. Klein was base maintenance supervisor, 34 years old, thin, wire glasses, smart, thorough. Anne knocked. Klein looked up. "Miss Carl, I heard about your crash. Are you all right?" Anne closed the door, locked it. "Captain Klein, someone is trying to kill me. I need your help." Klein stood up. His face went serious. "Sit down. Tell me everything." Anne sat, then realized she could not sit because of the broken ribs. She stood instead, leaned against the wall. There have been 3 incidents in 2 months: landing gear collapse, engine failure, hydraulic failure. All 3 were sabotage. I have evidence. But Colonel Harris is covering it up. I need someone to investigate officially, someone Harris cannot intimidate. Klein took off his glasses, rubbed his eyes. "Miss Carl, if I investigate this and find sabotage, it will destroy my career. Harris will have me transferred to Alaska, or worse. I have a wife, 2 daughters. I cannot risk my family's future." Anne felt something break inside her. "Then do not help me," she said. "Let them kill me. Let them kill the next woman pilot who comes through here. Let men like Hollis sabotage aircraft until someone dies." Klein stood there for a long moment. Then he put his glasses back on. "How many incidents did you say?" 3, Anne said. Klein nodded slowly. "Give me your evidence. I will investigate quietly. No official reports until I have proof Harris cannot ignore." "But Miss Carl, if I do this and get caught, We both lose everything. Anne met his eyes. Captain Klein, I already lost everything the moment I got into that aircraft this morning. I just do not know it yet. November 11th, 1943. Anne Carl's hands would not stop shaking. 3 days since the crash. 3 days of trembling fingers that made buttoning her uniform take 10 minutes. She dropped the third button. It bounced across the floor, rolled under her bunk. Anne sat down hard, stared at her hands. They looked like someone else's hands, pale, thin, shaking like an old woman's. The base hospital doctor had called it post-traumatic stress, said it would pass, gave her pills. Anne had thrown the pills in the trash. Pills would not fix this. Only flying would fix this. Getting back in a cockpit, proving she was not broken. But a pilot with shaking hands was a dead pilot. Everyone knew that. Anne clenched her fists, forced them still, opened them. They started shaking again immediately. Her roommate Sarah watched from the doorway. Anne, maybe you should take more time. Medical leave can be extended. Anne did not look up. I am fine, Sarah hesitated. You are not fine. You look like you are going to fall apart. Anne stood up, found the button under her bunk, picked it up. Her hands shook so badly it took 4 tries to thread it through the buttonhole. I said I am fine. Sarah left without another word. Anne finished dressing, walked to the mirror. Her face looked like someone had beaten her with a hammer. Purple nose, black eyes, split lip healing crooked. She looked like a corpse, felt like one too. But she had to go back to flying, had to prove that Hollis had not won, had to show every man on this base that sabotage would not drive her away. Anne picked up her cap, walked out. The November morning smelled like diesel fuel and frost. Every breath hurt. The broken ribs made inhaling feel like knives in her chest. Anne walked across the base toward operations, past groups of male pilots. They stopped talking when she approached, started again after she passed. She heard whispers. Crashed 3 aircraft. Should be grounded. Women cannot handle the pressure. Anne kept walking, kept her face blank, kept her shaking hands in her pockets. She climbed the stairs to Colonel Harris's office. Each step sent pain through her ribs. By the time she reached the 2nd floor, she was breathing hard, sweating, dizzy. She stopped outside Harris's door, waited, breathed, controlled the shaking, knocked, enter. Anne opened the door. Harris looked up from paperwork. His expression shifted. Surprise, then concern, then back to neutral. Miss Carl, you should still be on medical leave. I am fit for duty, Anne said. Her voice came out stronger than she felt. Harris studied her face. You look terrible. The flight surgeon cleared me for administrative duties and non-critical flights. Anne pulled the medical clearance from her pocket, handed it to Harris. Her hand shook. Harris noticed, took the paper, read it, set it down. He stood, walked to the window. Miss Carl, I owe you an apology. What happened with Sergeant Hollis should never have happened. I dismissed your concerns. I protected men who should have been investigated. I let my personal grief cloud my judgment. He turned to face her. My son died in 1942. A woman pilot was training that day. The investigation cleared her, but I blamed her anyway. When you arrived at Wright Field, I saw her, not you, her. I projected my anger onto you. That was wrong. Anne said nothing, waited. Harris continued. Captain Klein is investigating your incidents. I have given him full authority. If he finds proof of sabotage, I will prosecute whoever is responsible. No cover-up, no protection. But Miss Carl, until the investigation is complete, you are restricted to ferry missions only. No experimental testing. No high-risk flights. I will not have another pilot die on my watch because I ignored warning signs. Anne wanted to argue, wanted to demand full flight status immediately, but she was exhausted, in pain. Her hands would not stop shaking. Ferry missions were better than nothing. Yes, sir. Harris nodded. Dismissed. Anne left. Walked down the hall to Captain Klein's office. Knocked. Klein opened the door, looked both ways, pulled her inside, locked the door. He looked worse than Anne. Unshaven, wrinkled uniform, bloodshot eyes. Miss Carl, Klein said, I have been going through records for 3 days. Maintenance logs, personnel files, flight schedules, everything. His desk was covered in papers, coffee cups, overflowing ashtrays. The office smelled like stale cigarette smoke and desperation. I found connections. All 3 of your crashed aircraft were serviced by Sergeant Hollis before you flew them. Every single time. Klein pulled out a document. Look at this. This is the maintenance log from your P-51D 2 days before the crash. Airman Rodriguez noted a hydraulic leak. Recommended line replacement. But here, Klein pointed, Hollis overruled it, marked the aircraft flight ready. Rodriguez filed a complaint. Hollis dismissed it. Where is Rodriguez now? Anne asked. England. Transferred 2 days after your crash. I sent him a letter, but it will take weeks to get a response. Klein sat down heavily. Without Rodriguez's testimony, all I have is paperwork. Hollis will say he made honest mistakes, that the crashes were mechanical failures he missed. We need more. We need to catch him actually sabotaging an aircraft. Anne looked at the papers on Klein's desk, saw names, Hollis, Captain Raymond, Lieutenant Foster, others. How many men are involved? I do not know, Klein said. Hollis is the only one I can prove had access to your aircraft. But Miss Carl, someone is protecting him, someone higher up. Harris swears he is not involved, but there are other officers. Men who do not want women in the air forces. Men who see you as a threat. Anne felt cold. How do we catch them? Klein rubbed his eyes. I have an idea, but it is dangerous. You would be bait. I am already bait, Anne said. Klein nodded. Then here is what we do. I watch Hollis. Every night, wait for him to sabotage another aircraft. When he does, I document it, photograph it, get witnesses, build proof Harris cannot ignore. But Miss Carl, if Hollis realizes we are onto him, he might do something desperate. Anne thought about Hollis's wife, about the divorce, about a man who hated women enough to try to kill them. I understand the risk. How long will it take? Klein shrugged. Could be days, could be weeks. Hollis only works at night when he is alone. I will have to stake out the hangars. Wait. Watch. Anne left Klein's office, went to the flight line, found a ferry assignment. A P-47 Thunderbolt needed delivery to Patterson Field. Simple mission. 40 miles. Anne did the pre-flight inspection. Checked everything 3 times. Took an hour. Climbed into the cockpit. Started the engine. The Pratt & Whitney radial roared to life. The sound made her hands stop shaking. Up here she was in control. Up here everything made sense. She took off. Flew the mission. Landed. Came back. Did another ferry mission. Then another. Kept flying until her hands stopped shaking even on the ground. That night Anne could not sleep. She lay in her bunk thinking about Hollis, about Klein watching him, about how long it might take. At midnight she got up, got dressed, walked to the base chapel. Empty, cold. She sat in a pew, tried to pray. The words would not come. She had not prayed since before the war, did not know if God listened anymore. But she sat there anyway, silent, hoping. November 12th. Klein watched Hollis, all day, all night. Hollis worked normally, Repaired aircraft. Signed off on maintenance. Nothing suspicious. Klein stayed hidden. Watched. Took notes. Saw nothing. November 13th. Klein watched again. Hollis worked late. Klein hid in the hangar, behind crates, in shadows. Hollis finished work. Left. Nothing. Klein went home at 2 a.m, exhausted, frustrated. November 14th. Klein brought Lieutenant Chen to help. 2 sets of eyes. They split up, watched different hangars. Hollis worked on a P-38. Normal maintenance. Finished. Left. Nothing. Chen and Klein met afterward. "This is not working," Chen said. "Maybe Hollis knows we are watching." Klein shook his head. "Or maybe he is just waiting for the right opportunity." November 15th. Klein almost gave up. He had not slept more than 3 hours in 4 days. His wife was angry. His job was suffering. He was watching Hollis from behind a B-17 fuselage when he fell asleep. Woke 2 hours later. Hollis was gone. Klein cursed. Went home. Felt like a failure. November 16th. Klein decided this was the last night. One more attempt. If nothing happened, he would tell Anne they needed a different approach. He positioned himself in Hangar 3, behind maintenance equipment. Hollis was working late again. Klein watched. 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m., nothing. 11 p.m. Hollis finished working on a P-40, started to leave, then stopped, looked around, walked back to the aircraft. Klein's heart rate spiked. Something was different. Hollis pulled a small file from his toolbox, climbed up to the wing, started working on something Klein could not see clearly. Klein moved slightly, got a better angle, saw what Hollis was doing, filing through a control cable, not all the way, just halfway, deliberate, professional, murder disguised as maintenance. Klein gestured to Chen, who was hiding across the hangar. Chen saw, nodded. Both men watched. Hollis finished filing, tested the cable, pulled on it, made sure it would hold just enough tension. Then he climbed down, put the file away, started to leave. Klein and Chen stayed hidden until Hollis was gone. Then they approached the aircraft. Klein pulled out a flashlight, examined the cable. It was a P-63 King Cobra, tail number 42-68941. The cable was filed halfway through, barely visible. You would not see it during pre-flight unless you knew exactly where to look. Klein took photographs, multiple angles, documented everything. "Who is scheduled to fly this aircraft?" Chen asked. Klein checked the assignment board. His blood went cold. "Miss Carl, test flight tomorrow morning, 0700 hours, high altitude engine evaluation, 30,000 feet. Chen swore quietly. "If that cable snaps at altitude, she is dead." Klein nodded. "We need to tell Harris, now. But first, we need to make sure Hollis does not know we found this. We leave everything exactly as it is. The cable stays filed. The aircraft stays flight ready. Tomorrow morning we catch Hollis when he least expects it." They left the hangar, went to Klein's office. Klein called Harris at home, woke him up. "Sir, this is Captain Klein. I have proof. I need you at right field immediately." Harris arrived 30 minutes later, angry, in civilian clothes. "This better be important, Captain." Klein showed him the photographs, explained what they had witnessed. Harris's face went from anger to shock to cold fury in 10 seconds. He walked to Hangar 3 with Klein and Chen, climbed up to examine the cable himself, touched it, felt the file marks, climbed down. His jaw was tight. "Where is Hollis now?" "Home," Klein said. "Off duty until 0600. Harris looked at the aircraft, looked at Klein. "This aircraft is grounded effective immediately. Maintenance issue, control cable wear. Captain Klein, you will personally inspect and replace that cable. Miss Carl's flight is reassigned to a different aircraft. At 0600 hours when Hollis reports for duty, I want military police waiting. We arrest him the moment he sets foot on this base. Understood? Klein nodded. Harris turned to leave, then stopped. Captain Klein, Lieutenant Chen, you did good work. Thank you for not giving up. November 17th, 0547 hours. Anne arrived for her flight, found her assignment changed. Different aircraft, different mission. She was confused but did not ask questions. Started pre-flight on a P-51. At 0603 hours, she heard shouting. Turned. Saw military police running toward the maintenance hangar. Saw Sergeant Hollis emerge. Saw him see the MPs. Saw his face change. Recognition. Fear. He ran. Hollis sprinted across the flight line, boots pounding frozen ground. The MPs chased, 30 feet behind, 20. Hollis was fast, desperate. He reached the perimeter fence, grabbed chain link, started climbing. His hands slipped. He grabbed again, pulled himself up. The fence rattled, barbed wire at the top. Stop, an MP yelled. Stop or we shoot. Hollis did not stop. Reached the top, swung his leg over. Barbed wire caught his hand, tore through his palm. Blood sprayed. Hollis screamed, kept climbing, dropped to the other side, started running again. The MP raised his pistol, fired a warning shot into the air. Crack! The sound echoed across the base. Hollis kept running. The MP aimed lower, fired. Crack! The bullet hit Hollis's right thigh. He went down hard, face first into frozen dirt, screamed. Not words, just sound. Animal pain. He tried to crawl. His leg would not work. Blood soaking through his pants. Dark red spreading. The MPs reached him, flipped him onto his back. He fought, kicked with his good leg, punched, screamed. One MP pressed a knee into Hollis's chest. The other cuffed his hands behind his back. Hollis kept screaming. Why are you doing this? I did nothing wrong. I am a good mechanic. Women are the problem. Women are ruining everything. The MPs dragged Hollis to his feet. He could not stand on his shot leg. They carried him between them. He kept screaming the whole way to the brig. Anne watched from 200 feet away, watched them drag him past her. Hollis saw her, his eyes locked onto hers. You, he screamed. This is your fault. You should have quit. You should have died. Women do not belong here. Anne said nothing, just watched him disappear into the military police building. Watched the door close, heard his screaming fade. She stood there for a long time. Other pilots gathered, watching, whispering. Finally, Anne turned back to her aircraft, finished her pre-flight, climbed into the cockpit, started the engine, flew her mission. When she came back 2 hours later, Klein was waiting. Miss Carl, Hollis confessed, admitted to all 3 incidents. He will face court-martial for attempted murder. It is over. Anne nodded, felt nothing, should feel relief, victory, justice. But she just felt empty, hollow, because Hollis was one man. Klein had mentioned others, Raymond, Foster, Moore, and they were still out there, still hating, still waiting. This was not over. This was never going to be over. Thank you, Captain Klein. Klein hesitated. There is something else. Colonel Harris needs to see you. Now. Anne walked to Harris's office. Harris was standing at his window, did not turn when she entered. Miss Carl, Hollis confessed to sabotaging your 3 aircraft. He will be prosecuted. But there is a complication. The Army Air Forces has decided to classify this investigation. If news gets out that a woman pilot was targeted for murder because of her gender, the WASP program is finished. Congress will shut it down. 1,100 women will lose their jobs. Anne felt something break inside. You are going to cover it up. Harris turned. His face was grim. The court-martial will proceed. Hollis will be convicted, but the charges will be sabotage of military equipment, not attempted murder. The motive will not be mentioned. Your name will not be in the official record. This investigation will be sealed. Anne stared at him. So, Hollis tried to kill me because I am a woman, and you are going to pretend it was something else. Harris nodded slowly. Yes. No, Anne said. Absolutely not. I am going to the newspapers. I am going to Congress. I am going to tell everyone what happened. Harris held up a hand. If you do that, the WASP program ends tomorrow. Every woman pilot in the Air Forces loses her job. Is that what you want? Anne felt tears burning her eyes. You cannot make me choose between justice and other women's careers. Harris's voice softened. I am not making you choose. The situation is making you choose. I am just telling you what the consequences are. Anne walked out, slammed the door, walked back to her quarters. Her roommates were not there. Anne sat on her bunk, pulled out a piece of paper, started writing a resignation letter. I, Anne Carl, hereby resign from the Women Air Force Service pilots, effective immediately. Reason for resignation. She stopped. What was the reason? That she almost died 3 times and her government wanted to pretend it never happened? That justice mattered less than politics? That being a woman meant choosing between her own vindication and other women's futures? Anne signed the letter, folded it, put it in her pocket, walked toward Harris's office. She was halfway across the base when she saw a young woman walking toward the flight line. Maybe 20 years old, brown hair in a regulation bun. WASP uniform crisp and new. She was smiling, excited, carrying a flight bag. Anne stopped her. Excuse me, are you new here? The woman turned. Yes, ma'am, just arrived yesterday. This is my first day of ferry missions. I am so excited. I have dreamed of flying military aircraft my whole life. She paused. You are Anne Carl, right? The test pilot? Anne nodded. The woman's smile got bigger. You are my hero. I want to be just like you. Anne felt the resignation letter burning in her pocket. Looked at this girl who had no idea how close the WASP program was to ending. Who had no idea that men like Hollis existed. Who believed flying was about skill and courage instead of surviving sabotage and hate. Anne thought about quitting, about walking away, about letting this girl and 1,000 others face the same dangers without warning, about abandoning them because she could not get justice for herself. She could not do it. What is your name? Anne asked. Emily, the girl said. Emily Patterson. Anne felt something twist in her chest. Her daughter's name. Good luck on your mission, Emily. Fly safe. The girl saluted. Thank you, ma'am. Walked toward the flight line. Anne watched her go. Then she pulled out the resignation letter, tore it into pieces, let them fall, watched the wind scatter them across the base. She walked back to Harris's office. Knocked. Entered. Harris looked up. I will stay silent, Anne said. Her voice was flat, dead. About the motive. About my name not being in the record. I will let you classify the investigation, but I want something in return. Name it, Harris said. I want full flight status restored immediately. No restrictions. No ferry missions only. I go back on the experimental test rotation tomorrow, and I want your word that every future sabotage report from a woman pilot gets investigated. No dismissals, no excuses, no cover-ups. Harris stood, walked around his desk, extended his hand. You have my word. Anne shook it. His grip was firm. Then she left, walked to the flight line, found Klein. Captain Klein, the investigation is closed. Hollis is going to prison. That is all that matters. Klein looked confused. But Miss Carl, What about the cover-up? What about your name being erased? Anne met his eyes. Sometimes justice is not about getting credit. Sometimes justice is making sure it does not happen to the next person. Klein nodded slowly. I understand. That night Anne lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling. Her roommates were asleep. The barracks was quiet. Anne thought about Emily Patterson, about her daughter, Emily, about 1,100 women pilots who would keep flying because Anne had chosen silence over vindication. She thought about Hollis in a military prison for the rest of his life. Thought about Raymond and Foster and the others who were still out there, still hating, still waiting. This was not victory. This was survival. And survival was not glorious. Survival was messy and complicated and full of compromises that made you hate yourself. But Anne was still here, still flying, still fighting, and that would have to be enough. She closed her eyes. For the first time in 8 days, she slept without nightmares. Her hands had stopped shaking. December 1943 through August 1945. Anne Carl flew every day, sometimes twice. P-51s, P-47s, P-38s, B-17s, experimental variants, modified engines, new weapon systems. She tested them all. And before every flight, she spent 2 hours doing pre-flight inspections that should have taken 20 minutes. She checked every bolt, every cable, every hydraulic line. She trusted no one. Christmas Day, 1943. Anne drove 3 hours to her mother's house in Dayton. Her daughter Emily was 6 years old now, taller, missing 2 front teeth. She ran screaming down the driveway when Anne's car pulled up. "Mommy! Mommy!" Anne barely got out of the car before Emily crashed into her, wrapped small arms around Anne's waist, squeezed so hard Anne's broken ribs screamed. Anne did not care. She hugged her daughter, breathed in the smell of her hair, shampoo and playground dirt, and something sweet that was just Emily. They went inside. Anne's mother had cooked a ham, made mashed potatoes, green beans, apple pie. They ate dinner. Emily talked nonstop, about school, about her friends, about the Christmas pageant where she had played an angel. Anne listened, asked questions, pretended everything was normal, pretended she had not nearly died 4 times in the past 2 months. After dinner, Emily opened presents, a doll, new shoes, books. Then Anne gave Emily the stuffed rabbit, the one that had been meant for her birthday. Emily's eyes went huge. "A rabbit! I wanted a rabbit! Thank you, Mommy." She hugged the rabbit, named it Mr. Whiskers immediately. That night after Emily went to bed, Anne sat with her mother in the kitchen, drank coffee. Her mother looked at Anne's face. The bruises had faded to yellow and green, but were still visible. "Anne, what happened? You said you had an incident, but you look like you were in a car accident." Anne wrapped her hands around the coffee cup, felt the warmth. "It was a flying accident, Mom. Crash-landed, walked away with some bruises, nothing serious." Her mother frowned. "You should stop flying. Come home, raise your daughter." Anne shook her head. "I cannot stop. Not yet. Not until the war is over." Her mother reached across the table, took Anne's hand. "Emily needs her mother alive." Anne felt tears burning. "I know. I am trying. I promise I am trying." The next morning, Anne had to leave. "Drive back to right field," Emily cried, held on to Anne's leg. "Do not go, Mommy. Please stay." Anne knelt down, looked Emily in the eyes. "Baby, I have to go, but I will come back. I promise." "When?" Emily asked. Anne did not know, could not promise anything. "Soon," she lied. "Very soon." Emily hugged Mr. Whiskers. "Will you die like Daddy died?" Anne felt something break inside her chest. Emily's father had died when Emily was 6 months old. Heart attack. Emily barely remembered him. "No, baby," Anne said. "I will not die. I promise." Another lie. But what else could she say? Your mother flies experimental aircraft, and someone tried to murder her 3 times, and she might die any day, but do not worry about it? She lied, hugged Emily, got in her car, drove away, watched Emily in the rearview mirror, standing in the driveway, holding that stuffed rabbit, getting smaller and smaller until she disappeared. August 15th, 1945. Japan surrendered. Anne was at Wright Field when the announcement came over the radio. Everyone poured out of the hangars, cheering, hugging, crying. The war was over. They had won. Anne stood alone, watching. She should feel something, joy, relief, victory, but all she felt was empty, because the war ending meant the WASP program was ending. Within months, every woman pilot would be sent home. No benefits, no veteran status, no acknowledgement of their service. December 20th, 1944. Anne's last flight as a WASP, a P-51D delivery to Patterson Field. She did her 2-hour pre-flight, climbed into the cockpit one last time, started the Merlin engine, listened to it roar, felt the vibration through the airframe, took off, flew 40 miles, landed, climbed out, signed the delivery papers. A clerk handed her a bus ticket back to Wright Field. No ceremony, no handshake, no thank you for your service, just a bus ticket. Anne walked to the bus stop, waited, got on the bus, sat in the back, watched Ohio countryside pass by the window, and just like that, her career as a military pilot was over. September 1946. Anne's first day teaching at Dayton Flight School. Small operation. 3 Piper Cubs, 1 instructor, now 2. The owner was a man named George Hendricks, 55 years old, fat, smelled like cigars. He looked Anne up and down when she arrived. "So you are the WASP girl. Yeah, I heard about you women pilots. Flew some cargo around." Anne kept her voice level. "I was a test pilot. Flew P-51s, P-47s, experimental aircraft." Hendricks laughed. "Sure you did, honey. Look, you can teach the beginner students. Nothing complicated. Just basic stuff. Takeoffs, landings. I will handle the advanced students, the men." Anne nodded. "Whatever you say." Hendricks walked away. Anne stood there, feeling her hands shake, forced them to stop. Her first student arrived at 10 a.m. Tommy Richardson, 19 years old, rich kid. His father owned a car dealership. Tommy wore expensive clothes, leather jacket, sunglasses. He swaggered over to Anne, extended his hand. "Tommy Richardson, you must be the instructor." Anne shook his hand. "Anne Carl, nice to meet you." Tommy looked her up and down. "Wait, you are a woman. Hendricks did not tell me my instructor was a woman." "Does that matter?" Anne asked. Tommy shrugged. "I just figured a real pilot would be teaching me." Anne felt rage rising. She smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "Get in the Piper Cub, Tommy. We are going flying." They took off. Anne let Tommy take the controls. He was terrible. Over-controlled everything. Jerked the stick. Stomped the rudder pedals. The Cub wallowed through the sky like a drunk elephant. After 10 minutes, Anne took the controls back. "Tommy, watch this." She put the Cub into a barrel roll. The horizon spun. Sky, ground, sky, ground. Tommy's face went white, then green. "What are you doing? Stop!" Anne completed the roll, leveled out. That is called a barrel roll. It is a basic aerobatic maneuver. Any questions about whether women can fly? Tommy looked like he was going to throw up. "No, ma'am." "Good." Anne turned back toward the airport, lined up for landing, brought the Cub in smooth, greased the landing, parked, shut down the engine, climbed out. Tommy climbed out on shaky legs, walked 3 steps, bent over, vomited onto the tarmac. Anne walked past him, went to the office. Hendricks was doing paperwork. How did it go? Anne sat down. He did fine. Needs to work on control inputs, but he will learn. Hendricks nodded. Good. Tommy came in 10 minutes later, pale, shaky. He walked up to Anne. Miss Carl, I am sorry for what I said about you not being a real pilot. Anne looked at him. Apology accepted. Now go home, drink some water. Come back Thursday. We will try again. Tommy nodded, walked out. Hendricks watched him go. What did you do to that kid? Anne smiled. Taught him a lesson. Hendricks laughed. I like you, Carl. You got balls. Anne did not respond. Just went outside to pre-flight the next Cub. Robert Klein came to Dayton. His wife had died 3 months earlier. Cancer. Klein had written to Anne, told her he was lost, did not know how to go on. They had been corresponding for years, occasional letters, Christmas cards, old friends staying in touch. But after his wife died, the letters became more frequent, more personal, more desperate. Anne wrote back, told him grief was normal, time would help, but she could tell from his letters that he was drowning. He showed up at her house in October, Saturday afternoon. Anne answered the door. Klein was standing there, older, grayer, thinner, but still Klein. Anne, he said, I am sorry. I should have called. I just needed to see you. Anne stepped aside. Come in. They sat in the living room, drank coffee. Klein looked around. Nice house. Thank you, Anne said. I bought it last year. Klein nodded. Emily must be what, 15 now? 16, Anne said. She is at a friend's house. Klein looked at his coffee cup. Anne, I made a mistake. What kind of mistake? Anne asked. Klein looked up. His eyes were red. Marrying Helen. I should have married you. Anne felt her breath catch. Bob, Helen was a good woman. I know, Klein said. She was, and I loved her. But I thought about you every day for 20 years, every single day. Anne did not know what to say. Klein kept talking. In 1944, when we were investigating Hollis, when you trusted me with your life, I fell in love with you then. But I was already engaged to Helen, so I married her, did my duty, had a good marriage, 2 daughters. But Anne, I always wondered what would have happened if I had been brave enough to choose you. Anne set down her coffee. Bob, you cannot rewrite history. What happened, happened. Klein shook his head. I am not trying to rewrite history. I am trying to write the future. He took her hand. Marry me, not because it is convenient, not because we are both alone, because I love you, always have, always will. Anne looked at him, at this man who had saved her life, who had believed her when no one else did, who had risked everything to help her. She thought about saying no, about sending him away, about staying alone and safe, but she was tired of being alone, tired of being safe. She leaned forward, kissed him. When she pulled back, Klein was smiling. Is that a yes? Yes, Anne said. That is a yes. They were married 2 months later. Emily hated it at first, hated Klein for replacing her father, but eventually she came around, even started calling him Dad after a few years. June 1985. Anne was in her garden, planting tomatoes. She was 66 years old now, retired from teaching, living quietly with Klein in their house in Dayton. The doorbell rang. Klein answered it. Anne heard voices. Then Klein called out, Anne, there is someone here to see you. Anne wiped dirt off her hands, walked to the front door. An old man was standing there, maybe 65 years old, silver hair, weathered face, wearing a flight jacket with squadron patches. Ma'am, are you Anne Carl? Yes, Anne said. Who are you? The man's eyes filled with tears. My name is John Patterson. I flew P-51s in 1944, 357th Fighter Group, stationed in England. Anne felt something cold in her stomach. Okay. Patterson took a breath. In March 1944, I was assigned P-51D tail number 4322891. That aircraft had been test flown by you at Wright Field the month before. You logged 47 hours on it, tested the engine, the airframe, everything. You signed off on it as flight ready. Anne remembered. Vaguely. One aircraft among hundreds. What about it? Patterson smiled, but tears were running down his face. On April 8, 1944, I was escorting B-17s over Germany. We got hit by flak, heavy fire. My aircraft took damage. Wing, engine, fuselage. I should have gone down, but that P-51 kept flying. Got me home, saved my life. Anne felt her throat tighten. Over the next year, I flew that same aircraft 73 missions. It never failed me, never let me down. Other pilots were going down in aircraft that fell apart, but not me. Not in 4322891. That aircraft was solid because you tested it, because you made sure every bolt was tight, every system worked. You saved my life, Miss Carl, and I never got to thank you. Patterson extended his hand. So thank you. Thank you for doing your job so well that I got to come home. Got to marry my wife, have 3 kids, 6 grandchildren. I got to live because of you. Anne took his hand, shook it, could not speak, could not breathe. Patterson kept talking. I tried to find you after the war, but WASP records were sealed. No one would tell me where you were. Took me 40 years to track you down, but I had to tell you, had to let you know that your work mattered, that you saved lives. Anne started crying. Patterson pulled her into a hug. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you. They stood there on Anne's front porch, 2 old pilots, crying. Klein watched from inside, smiled, knew his wife had just received something she had been waiting 40 years to hear. Recognition, validation, proof that her sacrifice had meant something. November 12th, 1987. Anne was in her garden. 3:47 in the afternoon. She was planting bulbs for spring, tulips, daffodils. She stood up, felt pain in her chest, sharp, intense, like someone had stabbed her. She tried to walk toward the house. The pain got worse. Her left arm went numb. She knew what was happening. Heart attack. She tried to call for Klein, could not breathe, fell to her knees, then onto her side. The sky above her was blue, beautiful. She thought about Emily, about flying, about P-51s at 400 miles per hour, about the crash, about Hollis, about 47 test missions, about John Patterson and 73 missions in 4322891, about all the pilots she had saved without knowing. She tried to breathe, could not. Everything went gray. Klein found her 10 minutes later. He had been in the garage, came outside, saw her lying in the garden, ran to her. Anne? Anne! He checked her pulse. Weak, barely there. Called 911. The ambulance arrived 12 minutes later. They loaded her onto a stretcher, started IV, oxygen, rushed her to the hospital. Emily arrived an hour later, ran into the emergency room. Where is my mother? The doctor came out. Mrs. Klein had a massive heart attack. We are doing everything we can, but you should prepare yourself. It does not look good. Emily went into the room. Anne was unconscious. Tubes everywhere, machines beeping. Emily sat down, took her mother's hand. Mom, can you hear me? Anne's eyes fluttered, opened, looked at Emily, could not speak, tried anyway. Emily leaned close. I am here, Mom. I am right here. Anne tried to say something. Emily, attic. Emily frowned. What? Anne's grip on Emily's hand tightened. Notebook. Attic. Find it. Her eyes closed. The machine screamed. Doctors rushed in, pushed Emily out, Worked for 20 minutes, but Ann Carl was gone. Heart failure. Age 72. She died without ever telling Emily the truth. Died without breaking the silence. Died thinking the world would never know what she had survived. December 1987. Emily was cleaning out her mother's house, boxing belongings, deciding what to keep, what to donate, what to throw away. Klein was there, old now, broken. He sat in Ann's chair, staring at nothing. Emily worked around him. She remembered her mother's last words. Notebook. Attic. Find it. But Emily had searched the attic twice. Found nothing. On the third attempt, she moved boxes of Christmas decorations. Behind them was a metal box. Old, rusted, locked. Emily's hands started shaking. This was it. This was what her mother wanted her to find. She carried the box downstairs, found a hammer, broke the lock. It snapped. Emily opened the box. Inside was a notebook, leather-bound, worn, yellowed pages, her mother's handwriting, dated entries. Emily sat down on the floor, started reading. November 8th, 1943. P-51D tail number 43, 1FEM789. Hydraulic failure at 12,000 feet. Both primary and backup systems. Hollis dismissed scratches during pre-flight. I nearly died today. Control lines were cut. This was deliberate. Emily stopped. Read it again. Control lines were cut. This was deliberate. Her mother had been sabotaged. Someone had tried to kill her. Emily kept reading. Hands shaking. Breath coming fast. October 3rd, 1943. Landing gear collapse on touchdown. Investigation found hydraulic fluid deliberately drained. Official report blames pilot error. Blames me. But I know someone sabotaged this aircraft. Klein believes me. Harris does not. Emily flipped pages, found more entries. October 17th. Engine failure. Water and fuel tanks. Hollis fueled this aircraft. November 19th. Klein caught Hollis sabotaging P-63. Filed control cable. Emily read faster. The whole story unfolding. The investigation. The arrest. The court-martial. The cover-up. Harris asking Ann to stay silent. Ann choosing to protect the WASP program instead of seeking justice. Emily sat on the floor surrounded by her mother's boxes and cried. Her mother had been a hero, had survived multiple murder attempts, had sacrificed everything to protect other women, and Emily had never known, had spent 16 years thinking her mother was just a flying instructor, had never understood the weight her mother carried, the secrets she kept, the price she paid for silence. Emily carried the notebook to Klein. He was still sitting in Ann's chair. Captain Klein, do you know about this? She handed him the notebook. Klein read the first page, closed his eyes. Yes, I was there. Why did Mom never tell me? Emily asked. Klein opened his eyes, tears running down his face. Because the investigation was classified. Your mother was ordered to stay silent. She kept that order for 44 years, even after it did not matter anymore, because that is who Ann was. She followed her word, even when her word hurt her. Klein kept talking, his voice shaking. I loved your mother from the day I met her, November 1943. She walked into my office covered in blood and mud from a crash, told me someone was trying to kill her, asked me to help. I almost said no, almost told her I could not risk my career. But Emily, your mother looked at me and said, if you do not help me, I am dead. And the next woman is dead too. She did not beg, did not cry, just stated facts. And I realized she was right, so I helped, and it almost cost me everything. But your mother, she paid a higher price. She stayed silent, protected everyone else, and got nothing in return. Klein died 2 weeks later. Heart failure. Emily thought he died of a broken heart, could not live without Ann. At the funeral, Emily held the notebook, knew what she had to do, She went to the National Archives, filed Freedom of Information Act requests, asked for records on Ann Carl, WASP program, Sergeant Mike Hollis, court-martial, Wright Field, 1943. It took 3 years, hundreds of forms, thousands of phone calls. But in 1990, Emily received 374 pages of declassified documents. Everything. The truth. Emily contacted Dr. Margaret Walsh at the Smithsonian. Walsh was writing a book about WASP pilots. Emily showed her the documents, the notebook, everything. Walsh read them. Her face went pale. "This is extraordinary. This changes everything. This proves that women pilots were targeted for violence, that the military covered it up. I need to include this in my book." Emily said yes. Walsh's book was published in 1994. Women Pilots of World War II, The Untold Stories. Chapter 7, The Sabotage of Ann Carl. The book became a bestseller. News programs did segments. Woman pilot survived murder attempts, kept silent for decades. Newspapers ran articles. Ann Carl's name was everywhere. Emily gave interviews, told her mother's story. People listened. People cared. The WASP community rallied, demanded recognition, demanded apology. The United States Air Force issued a formal apology to Ann Carl's family. A ceremony at the Pentagon. Emily attended. Generals gave speeches, talked about courage, sacrifice, legacy. Emily accepted a certificate, an apology for her dead mother. She should have felt vindicated. Instead, she felt rage. They apologized to a dead woman, a woman who died thinking no one would ever know, who died carrying 44 years of secrets. The apology meant nothing. It was 50 years too late. The United States Congress awarded Ann Carl the Congressional Gold Medal posthumously. Emily stood on a stage in Washington, accepted the medal, heavy, gold. It should have meant something, should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt hollow. Her mother should have received this 57 years ago, should have received it alive, should have known her sacrifice mattered. But she died not knowing, died thinking the truth died with her. And that made the medal feel like an insult. That same year, the Smithsonian opened an exhibit on WASP pilots, featured Ann Carl prominently, displayed her notebook, her flight logs, photographs, a replica P-51D cockpit. Visitors could sit in it. Imagine losing hydraulics at 12,000 feet. Imagine choosing to ride the aircraft down rather than bail out. Emily brought her daughter to the exhibit, Ann Jr., 17 years old now, named after her grandmother. "Look," Emily said, "this was your grandmother. She was brave. She was strong. She saved lives by staying silent, even though it destroyed her." Ann Jr. looked at the photographs. Young Ann, beautiful, fearless, in a flight suit, standing next to a P-51, smiling. "I want to be like her," Ann Jr. said. "I want to fly." Emily hugged her daughter. "You already are like her, more than you know." Ann Jr. graduated from the Air Force Academy, became a fighter pilot, flew F-16s, something impossible without women like her grandmother who had endured sabotage and hate to make it possible. Ann Jr.'s squadron called themselves the Night Witches, after Soviet women pilots, but they also honored Ann Carl, honored what she survived. Ann Jr. came home on leave, visited Emily, showed her the squadron patch, a woman pilot silhouetted against the moon. Below it said, "Ann Carl Squadron." Emily cried, knew her mother would have been proud. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base unveiled a statue, bronze, 9 feet tall, Ann Carl in flight suit, helmet under one arm, looking up at the sky. Thousands attended, active duty pilots, veterans, WASP survivors in their 90s. Emily was there, 86 years old now, in a wheelchair, weak, dying. But she came anyway, because her mother deserved to be there. Anne Jr. stood beside her grandmother, in uniform, F-16 pilot, 3 generations, test pilot, advocate, fighter pilot. The base commander gave a speech, talked about courage, sacrifice, breaking barriers. Then Anne Jr. pulled the cloth off the statue. The crowd gasped. It was beautiful, perfect, captured Anne's determination, her strength, her refusal to quit. The crowd saluted. An F-16 flew overhead, low, fast, thunder rolling across the base. Anne Jr. saluted too, tears streaming down her face. Emily looked up at the statue of her mother, at the plaque below, Anne Carl, test pilot, WASP, 1918 and 1987. She chose silence so others could soar. Emily died 3 months later, peaceful, in her sleep. Before she died, she finished a memoir. My Mother's Secret, the story of Anne Carl, published after her death. It told everything: the sabotage, the silence, the cost, the sacrifice. The book ended with one sentence: my mother kept silent so other women could fly. Now I am breaking that silence so everyone knows what it cost her. Today, Anne Jr. is a lieutenant colonel, still flying, still fighting. Every November 8th, she stands vigil at her grandmother's statue, 24 hours, honoring her memory, making sure silence never happens again, making sure the truth stays alive. And somewhere beyond death, maybe Anne Carl knows her daughter found the notebook, knows the truth came out, knows her sacrifice meant something, knows women fly fighters now because she survived, because she stayed silent, because she chose the mission over herself. Maybe she knows. Maybe she is finally at peace. Or maybe she just wishes someone had told her it mattered before she died. But wishes do not change history. Only truth changes history. And the truth, buried for 44 years, finally set her free.